Okay, so we're back for part three of this April the 6th lecture. So the thing about talking about this incident with Dr. Lanyon, it would not be good for us not to actually talk about the incident in and of itself. So we know that, so a couple more words, right, that you might not know. This word admittance, right? Admittance simply means entry, right? If you admit something, that often means that you confess to something. But in this case, admittance is to be let in, right? To be let into a building, to be let into a university. I got admitted to a hospital, right? Admittance simply means that kind of mission. We know that one of the things about we talked about Jekyll's letter, right? And he's talking about how something is unmanning him, right? He mentions, right, that if I am the chief of sinners, I will also be the chief of sufferers, right? Now unmanning simply means to take away courage or manhood, right? It's not like an unmanned spacecraft. And in this case, right, the definition, especially in the Victorian era, of what a human being should be, this idea of men should not be weak in public, right? We know that right now, Jekyll has always been this pinnacle of moral strength. People see him, and he's this idea of his strength and his manhood and him being distinguished, right? All of this he talks about it's being taken away from him. And we'll notice, right, especially when we compare the fact that Hyde is referred to like a dwarf, like a monkey. He does have a kind of savage strength, but he's always depicted as being small, dwarfish. That there's a certain idea of the idea of that virility, right, and goodness go together, right? That evil is weak, right? That evil is weak and vile, right? And the idea that that they go together, we're seeing the idea of virility and goodness go together in this Victorian model, right? I mean, it seemed to Utterson that everything was good because, as he says, Jekyll had once again been going back to his I believe it's amities, right? So I mean, again, right? If you have amity with someone, that means you have friendship. Amity literally means friendship. If you're amiable, that means your friendship. Amity just refers to those things you like, right? Those activities or things you like. Or also it can just refer to your friendly relationships, right? Those things, those occupations, those activities that you like are your amities. And so this idea that he's being unmanned, right, when everything seemed to be back to something like normal, is again part of this mystery, this sudden change that just seems so out of the ordinary. And with this incident with Dr. Lanyon, this idea of a sudden change after everything had been good, this also is very much the same. This sudden change, because Lanyon, right, all of a sudden, Lanyon even tells Utterson after he sees him about how ill he looks. Right, it says it looks like he has a death warrant, right? And a warrant, of course, just is an authorization, right? A death warrant just means a death order, right? And it looks like he'd received his death warrant. And he says, yeah, I'm only going to live for a few weeks. He's like, I've received a horrible shock. And when asked about the details of that, right, he won't even talk about what those details are. He won't even talk about what's going on. And that, with the mystery, is made us to think that those things are related, right? The withdrawal of Henry Jekyll, the shock to the system of Dr. Lanyon, this mystery that's just under the surface. One of the ways this is a really good mystery is we can see that all of these pieces go together. We can see that all of these different things are connected, but we're not entirely sure how they're connected, right? We're not really even sure what's going on. And we know that Lanyon, right, he makes Utterson his trustee, right? That means the person entrusted with something, right? The person trusted or entrusted with something is the trustee, right? They're often like if someone receives something in a will, they become the trustees, right? You may have heard of a trust fund, right? People who receive those are trustees. And so we know that Utterson, he has the mystery at his fingertips, right? But at the same time, right, we also know this word is also used in the chapter, this word stringent, right? And this word stringent can mean harsh or severe, harsh, severe, exacting, right? If something is stringent, that means it's definitely letter to the law, right? If I'm going to have stringent requirements, that means everything will be done exactly, everything the way I want. And so Utterson, the reason why he can be trusted with all of these details, even though they don't tell him a lot, right? They tell him, just leave me alone. Don't ever talk about Dr. Jekyll again. Jekyll says Utterson to leave me alone. Lanyon says, don't ever talk to me about Dr. Jekyll again. They're not lying to him. They're clearly hiding something, and they're not telling him what. But at the same time, the only reason why they can give him some of the evidence, but not all of the evidence, is they can trust in his his own stringent regard for their confidentiality and for his own honor and responsibility, right? And that's the thing. Like when he leaves the thing for Utterson as the trustee and said, should only be opened by Utterson after my death, and then says, in case of his pre-decease, right? That means that if Mr. Utterson dies ahead of time, right? Pre meaning before, decease meaning to die, right? If someone is dead, they are called deceased, right? So it's literally pre-death, right? He says, in the case of the pre-decease, meaning if Utterson dies before me, this letter is to be burned, right? And so the idea is that Lanyon, this story, the only person who he trusts with this is Gabriel Utterson. He's the only man to be trusted. And that's because he's probably the only man who is going to have like the high level of virtue, the integrity to not open it up until it says he can, right? And, it says it puts it, right? Again, where does he put Lanyon's testimony that can't be read into the, where does he put it? He puts it in the deep recesses of his safe, right? Again, buried secrets, right? But in this case, buried willfully, right? And one of the interesting things is that the buried secrets that are in this, they're all being buried by human choice, right? All of these secrets, it's not that they can't be exposed, and they're going to be exposed in the book, right? Everything, there aren't going to be any secrets of what's going on. But we'll notice that Lanyon has buried his secrets by choice. Jekyll is retreating and bearing his secrets by choice. And we also see Utterson, again, because of his integrity and the trust. Where do those secrets go in that envelope that he could read anytime, but he's not going to? Buried in the safe, right? There's this theme of secrets and the way everything is put forward, and that becomes fairly consistent throughout the text. The main thing, if we're looking at the important aspects of the plot, right? The most important things to look at in this chapter is the idea of sudden turns, right? Whether it be the shock to Dr. Lanyon, right? That all of a sudden he receives this shock and it's going to kill him, right? You have the shock to Dr. Lanyon, the total disappearance of Hyde, right? And then the sudden reclusion, right? The sudden reclusiveness of Dr. Jekyll. All of these things just seem to happen just all of a sudden. And this is kind of the idea of not only, again, just this idea of heightening the tension of the mystery, but one of the things you'll know is that that's kind of been a theme throughout the text, right? So when Gabriel Utterson wanted to find out about Hyde, right, he finds out about him, he talks to Henry Jekyll about him. Jekyll tells him to drop it, and then there's a murder, right? Like there's a murder a year later, right? And these secrets about Hyde, none of them really even started coming out until after the murder of Sir Danvers Carew. In the same way, several months are going to go by. For 2 months, Jekyll's going to seem like his old self. Not only that, but super good, even getting religion. And then all of a sudden, back into seclusion. And Utterson keeps going to try to see him, but Jekyll, in spite of Jekyll's letter, still tries to go and see him. But he can't get in. He can't be admitted. Poole, right? That's the name of the butler, Poole. Should remember that character name, Poole, right? He's the head butler, right? The head butler isn't just a servant, he's the head servant, right? He's going to be the butler is the head of staff, right? You are the head honcho. Because Jekyll has a whole group of servants, especially to manage an estate that big. And so this idea, right, is once again, it's not that people don't suddenly disappear, but only a rich person can be reclusive the way Henry Jekyll is. Right? Because in order for him to be able to not go out and not be seen the way he's not being seen, it requires people to be able to bring him his food, leave it outside the door, and walk away. Right? And that also begs us the question, right, is how has Mr. Hyde been able to be disappeared for this long, right? Normally, in order to successfully not poke your head out for so long, you would probably need to have resources or someone helping you or someone helping you hide in order for hide, right? In order for that to be possible. And this is this key, kind of this key idea, right? This idea of we see that Jekyll is able to be a recluse and he's able to disappear because he's a person of means. And that leads us to kind of automatically ask that follow up question of, well, how has Hyde remained vanished for so long? What's going on with this? What's going on with the disappearance of Edward Hyde? And all of these things as parallels, because Dr. Lanyon, he goes downhill fast, right? It says like a fortnight after the visit, right? Dr. Lanyon is dead. A fortnight, by the way, if you don't know that term, fortnight, not the game, right? A fortnight refers to 2 weeks, right? It's an old Shakespearean term. And this idea, right, a fortnight is usually a half month. And the idea that you guys should be aware of in understanding this is that all of these things in their timing, right? Like there's nothing for a while, then there's a spike, everything's fine, then there's a spike, right? This is, again, this recurrent theme in the text in order to try to help us to make sense of like what some of these parallels are and how these kind of sudden shocking turn of events happen. And a lot of these things are going to make even less sense in the next section, which is very, very short, called The Incident at the Window. And that will be tomorrow. We'll talk about that tomorrow. And it's the last time that we are going to see Henry Jekyll alive. Spoiler alert. But it's a very, very odd situation. And the odd situation, again, this idea that we know that something is amiss, that's another word that we're going to have to learn in the coming chapter. Something's amiss, something's going on, but it's all right there. And the idea is that if you already know the end of the story, a lot of these details make sense afterwards, but they really don't make a lot of sense not knowing the story and not knowing the twist at the end. And in that sense, Robert Louis Stevenson does some very, very effective reading because he's assembling a lot of these interrelated clues, and we see how they can relate to each other. But what we don't see is we don't see the fullness of how they relate to each other. We don't see kind of how the pieces fit together yet, but we do know that they fit together. And we do know that Lanyon and Hyde and Jekyll, they're all related somehow, but we're still not sure how that is. And that's going to resolve itself in the final part of the book, which is coming awfully fast. So I hope you're enjoying it so far. Jesus loves you, so do I. Sorry for enduring this sit-down lecture. I'm sure you could probably maybe read it a little easier, at least I hope. But again, I would much rather be talking and making it more like a normal day. So I will see the standard level sophomores on Tuesday. Remember that your Zoom thing, which is mandatory, right? Mandatory, not you have that on starting on Tuesday morning, so don't be late for that appointment. And honor sophomores, as you know, I will be seeing you on Thursday. That'll be basically the last thing of your week, I would imagine, because you have Good Friday off. Remember, there are only 3 sets of lectures this week because of the quiz will be posted on Holy Thursday, on Maundy Thursday, as it's called, and you have Good Friday off. So anyway, I hope everything is going well with all of you. Jesus loves you, as so do I. Stay safe, stay healthy, don't get sick, and I look forward to seeing you all in person as soon as humanly possible.